right, everyone, we're going to go through a treatment case today. So this is a 14 that I started about a month ago. You can see on the cone beam, the caries was very deep here, approaching the furcation. She wanted to save it, and you can see that she's definitely not saving 19. So go ahead and trying to save this tooth here. This is kind of what was causing the issue, is that gap there between the crown and number 15. Opened it up, took the crown off, cleaned out the caries, and here's what it looks like with the calcium hydroxide. So we're going to be going through how I finished this case today and what the buildup and restorative process was like, because that was certainly fun. So what we used here was this is a Glickman clamp, and it's really great for cases like this where it's broken down. This dentist prefers that I restore the teeth for them and create a pretty much crown preparation that makes it very easy for them to just have a very straightforward finish appointment for the crown. So I like using the Glickman in these cases, especially if you have a good solid tooth to grab onto behind it. Keeps the lips and gum tissue out of the way. On the mandible, it works really well as far as getting the tongue out of the way too. So definitely spent a while doing that. That's why I kind of made a cut there. But clean out the cavit here. There's cavit both on the axis that I did through the occlusal as well as the distal. I left the distal cavit in there from the beginning just so I didn't have to worry about any leakage or anything. Just gentle strokes here with the diamond. Don't want to take away any tooth structure and only want to remove the cavit. As you can see, my assistant is in there with both the suction and the air. If you're not using your assistants like this, train them to do it. It works so nicely where you don't really have to stop and keep wiping the mirror. You can also use, there's a product called Mirror Magic from a company called Zerk that I love using. So what we've done here, I've got the links from last time. We're going to be doing a coneless technique for the obturation here, and what I'm doing is making sure that we are still patent down to working length. A couple of these were a little bit tight, so you're going to see I have to work through them here, but that's what we're doing, is checking them. I definitely like using little slight bends in the file as well, so recommend kind of working through that. You can see as we're going through here, just checking all 4 canals, making sure we're still patent. A little bit of watch winding here because we're a little tight. I believe both the distal buccal and the MB2 were a little tight getting all the way down. Looks like MB1 actually too. So got to clean those all out. And the reason why is when we're using a coneless technique here, you have to be patent, and you have to make sure you have a clear guide all the way down. If there's any spots where it's hitting along the way, where the gutter pressure has a chance to bind, it will. And so this is what I've learned as I've been working on, perfecting this technique for obturation, is you need to take that 20K file back down, recapitulate, and make sure there's nothing in the way, that it goes down without any friction whatsoever. So I think at this point we're looking pretty solid here. Happy with that. So we're going to do our final rinse process. The tooth is asymptomatic after the calcium hydroxide, so what we're going to do here is just do a regular rinse. As you can see, the assistant did not have the tip on all the way that she should have, so had a little bit of leakage there, but no big deal. We were able to get that up. So this is just regular bleach. Got to use that to clean out. And what I'm doing here, the calcium hydroxide already did all the cleaning for me. I'm not worried about bacteria or anything at this point, but I want to remove as much of the calcium hydroxide as well. And so I like to use a combination of not only sodium hypochlorite, but also EDTA to just get in there, knock everything loose so that there's no remaining debris. Once again, if you're going to use that squirt technique where you don't use a cone, you have to have clear straight line access all the way down to the very bottom. So going through this is our EDTA rinse. I like to just go until both of them are clear. So I'll run the bleach until it's nice and clear, activate just to knock anything loose. I run the EDTA till it's nice and clear, and you often find that the bleach gets some of it out, the EDTA gets the rest of it out. There'll still be debris coming out of here. And then I like to do a final rinse with isopropyl alcohol. This just helps make it very, very easy to dry. This is a technique I learned a few years ago and started implementing, and it saves a ton of time as far as drying the canals. So we're going to go in here with my microsuction. This is on my ASI cart. You can get different tips for this. I forgot what size this is. I'll write it in the comments. And this is a really nice way to suction out most of it. You then go in with an air-only Stropco. The PSI on this is only at like 4 or 5, so it's not as high. I'm not worried about emphysema or air emphysemas or anything like that, or air embolisms, sorry. And then you really only have to use about 1 paper point per canal. You'll see on this palatal here, there's a little bit of gunk that was still left inside there, so I'm going to go back in, make sure that that's all the way clean. Had a nice little bleeding point there, so I'm very happy with that. And then on the distal buccal as well, make sure those look good. So at this point, we do take photos on all my patients, so this is the one that I like to send into the offices, showing them that, hey, there is an MB2. We got that all cleaned up. That's what it looks like when it is cropped and ready to go. And then we're going to start the process of obturation. So for this case, like I said, we're going to use a coneless. What you do is you take your paper point, coat the sealer in it, and then put it down about halfway or so. It doesn't have to go all the way to length because we're going to come back in one more time with that 20K file and use this to help carry the sealer all the way to the apex. What I've found is that you need to use a sealer that flows really nicely. I've played around with BC, love it for single cone techniques. For this technique though, it seems to bind up and become very viscous whenever it's heated. And I know I've tried high flow, I've tried all the sorts of types, and it doesn't seem to work that well with this technique. So I've gone back to the tried and true. I've been using this technique now since probably 2018, and it's 2023 as of the filming of this video. So this is how it works. Go in, put it in there. I like to use the 25 gauge tip, and then you come right back in with the plugger. It has to be nickel titanium because it needs to flex and bend with it, and you're going to push it about halfway down, give or take. This is the hardest part to develop, is knowing how hard to push. So on wide open canals, you're going to push a lot less because the gutta percha is going to do the job for you, and on skinny canals like this, you have to push a little bit more as far as getting everything down in there. And then I just go one canal at a time on here. You want the gutta percha to still be hot when you're actually pushing down inside here, and so I will backfill the area that I pushed in and then go straight to the next one, fill that up, and then seal off the top part, as you can see here. I absolutely love these pluggers. I have been using them now for 12 years, and I've had one break the entire time, and I am very hard on them. The other thing that's fantastic about them is they are sized matched, so it's a 35 and a 70 on the back. The 35 is nickel titanium, so it's very flexible here. You can see it just bends really nicely, and in a moment you'll see me use the back end. That is a stainless steel, and it's almost sharp on the end. What that allows you to do is almost cut the gutta percha so that it becomes really, really clean. The other thing that I love about this system is these multiple bendable tips, because oftentimes, especially with smaller accesses, I'm going to have to bend both the needle and kind of do some awkwardness to get the gutta percha, the tip of the beta, in where I need it to go. So really nice system, and they tend to I tend to not break that often, which is great. I've used a bunch of different options here, and this seems to be my favorite by far. The B&L, as far as their beta, it lasts pretty long. I've had to replace 2 so far. You also need to replace that back plunger pretty often when you're using the squirt technique, because you're doing it so often here. So that's it for obturation. We're going to go through here, clean out with the isopropyl alcohol again. This gets rid of all the AH+, gets it ready to seal up, and then I'm going to come back in. With this technique, you're usually going to have voids at that midpoint, right where the extent of the plugger goes apically, and so I like to use what's called a pack-mac. So this works. It's a reverse threaded headstrum. You put it into the slow speed handpiece, spin it at 20,000 RPMs, and it will apically compact your gutta percha as it goes in. This is a very technique sensitive tool. It took me probably 3 or 4 months of using it every day to finally feel comfortable with it, and it still gets me every now and then. You can see that type 2 canal popping up there. That was fun out of the MBs. But once you start getting the use of it, it gets rid of all your voids so quickly. Great, great, great file. I cannot recommend it highly enough. Here I'm using the back end of the plugger like we talked about. That stainless steel end just does such a nice job cutting the gutta percha cleanly. You can see it there on the MB2. Just cut that off right away. And what we're going to come back in, just compact it, make sure everything looks nice and clean, and then I'll need to refill that MB where the type 2 pushed out a little bit with the beta here, just to make sure everything looks perfect. Now, this obturation technique is a little messy compared to using cones. As far as you can see, there's more gutta percha, there's more sealer everywhere, but in the end, once it looks about the same as far as what the chamber looks like and everything on the inside, and you'll see the x-ray here in just a second that we're going to take to show you what the check film looked like. And there it is. So very happy with it. Love that split on the palatal. With this technique, you will always get sealer puffs too. So hopefully everyone is fine with sealer puffs who's watching this. All right, now the fun part. Let's build up this poor little tooth. So this is the distal aspect where the deep caries was, and I'm going back in here with just a really nice long carbide. If you gently hit it, you can actually get the rubber dam to kind of move out of your way here. I'm going to be doing a full buildup. I'm not going to have any interproximal contact, but I like when I'm doing these to not leave any margins at all. I did used to leave margins for docs, and what I found is the gums would grow over those margins and they would just be a bloody mess. And if you leave everything completely flush, as you'll see in this final image here in about 10 minutes, you'll see it looks really pretty on the x-ray, but more importantly, the gum tissue just heals up to exactly where it wants to go, and it's healthy. With this case, the gums have actually healed up a ton compared to the first visit. Sorry for not recording that. I'm just getting the system set up and trying to play around with it. So let me know what you think of it. And the gums are still a little bit inflamed, but way better than they were the first time. So a little bit of viscostat here just to get inside there, help start the process of the stopping that bleeding is just getting some hemostasis in there. I like using ferric sulfate. It seems to work better than aluminum chloride, and I'm in the posterior, so I'm not really worried about staining anyway. And then this is a fun technique. I like to use the alpha from B&L. It's cordless. You can use a System B or whatever you want. And you can go in here, and this rubber dam I think was just super tough, but generally if you hit this stuff with heat, the rubber dam will break like that and get out of the way. I think I will fast forward here in a little bit because I'm pretty finicky with the dam and making sure everything's perfect. All right, so let's speed this up. So we're at 3 times here. As you can see, what we're doing with this is cauterizing the tissue and removing it. I know that sounds harsh, but called the patient the day after and she had no pain whatsoever. It's amazing how often they have no problems with this. When the patient bit down for the check film, the rubber dam had moved a little bit, so you saw me adjusting it there. Once again, I just like to be pretty finicky and make sure that we have really clean margins. Don't want the rubber dam touching anything because I'm going to be placing composite all the way down to the apex of the tooth. So going in here now with a disclosing solution. This is from BioClear. Rinse that off, and anything that is pink is where there's bacteria. So this is the sandblaster from them. It works extremely well. I've been implementing this now for about 1.5 years, and I absolutely love it. The margins look incredible, and wait until you see how clean the picture looks. I know that check film or that check picture with before we did the obturation was a little messy. Just wait until you see how pretty this picture looks here in a little bit. So we're gonna start the bonding process here. So I like to use total etch. I'm going to be using Curari's Clear Fill SE for the rest of it. And there is still some cement there left from last time. So we're going to go back in and quickly remove that. Go back in with my the large 818 burr that I like to use for all my preps. Get that off. We're going to re-etch and then go back in with prime and bond and get that looking perfect here. So have the assistant suction that up so it doesn't leak into their mouth. And voila. So now we have everything nicely etched and we are ready for our picture, and look at how clean this is. So really pretty. It gives it almost that matte finish when you sandblast it. You can see there's still a nice ring of enamel around this tooth as well. We want to keep that if at all possible to allow them to bond the crown. So let's go ahead and get in with our buildup. So this is our Clear Fill SE. I use a separate prime and bond three bottle system. I know it's finicky, but it works extremely well, has great bond to both dentin and enamel, works well for repairing crowns as well. So I've used this stuff for 9 years now, and huge fan of it. Works extremely well, even though it is annoying having the 3-bottle system, obviously. So get in there, scrub everything nicely. You'll see that I use a air only Stropco to help thin this as well. If you have the ability to get an air only device, I highly recommend it as well, because there's no risk of water coming out. Oftentimes when I would work at an office that didn't have this option, you'd go in there and try to do the restorative and it would spray water all over your nice clean surface. You'd have to go back and re-etch, rebond, because you want to make sure everything is as clean as possible. Go ahead and do the full 20-second cure here. That was sped up so you don't have to wait for that whole entire time. And then we're going to come in and I'm going to seal this using Build It. I like using opaque for this because it gives the dentist a really clear margin of what is composite, what is the tooth. This tooth, even with the deep caries, is pretty much all super gingival, so she should be able to do a really nice crown, no issues here. Building up the deepest parts first, and on this one we actually have to do a couple because there's so much tooth structure to replace, both from the caries and then also because I'm going to be removing, as we talked about earlier, I don't want to leave the prep margins. I want everything to be nice and smooth, and so I will be going back through and completely encasing the tooth in composite. So that was our first one, ran out. I am gently kind of shape this area with my little glick instrument, and the assistant's mixing up the other one. I know the Build It does come with tips that you can use for this. Number one, they're pretty bulky, and so they're pretty awkward to use inside the mouth. I'm not a huge fan of it. Number two, there's a lot of waste associated with that as well. And so Build It is a very expensive material, as is Luxicor, the other material that I use for my dual cure material for sealing up. And so when you hand mix it in the Centrix tube. That saves you both the material as well as the cost of the tips. And I like that you can bend that tip. If you've noticed anything about me, I like having flexibility in where I'm putting things, and having bendable instruments and tips is a key to that. So seal everything up, get all around the margin here, come back in with the glick. And I like using this straight end around margins like this to try to just flatten off any excess to composite. The original one has already cured because it is a dual cure material, but what that allows you to do is not have as much mess and cleanup to do interproximally or around those margins where you need to be pretty careful. Did 2 cures on this one because it was so thick. I like to do 20 seconds on both buccal and lingual just to make sure everything is completely solid. Coming in here with this flat wheel, I absolutely love this burr. Highly, highly recommend it. It lasts forever. I'll drop a link in the description below if you guys want to buy them. I believe I get these from eBay. I'll double check, but they work extremely well and last a very long time. Great for any caries cases where you're going to be flattening out the occlusion, and for adjusting crowns. So great, great, great burr. Coming back in with that same microcopy burr from earlier. And you will see very quickly here why I don't do crowns, because I am very finicky. When you're in the microscope and zooming in at this is 10 times right here, you want everything to be absolutely perfect. So what I'm going to do is gently brush and come along, removing that composite until I see where the dentin is. And you can see right there, we got that root dentin coming along. And what this is going to do is create a really smooth surface. If you leave anything rough in there, the gingiva almost wants to grow over it. And that gingiva is going to be very inflamed and upset, and it's going to make for a very difficult crown preparation. I found out that if you come in here, smooth everything off instead, the gingiva that forms is very nicely keratinized. It's very healthy. We usually give our patients little proxy brushes just to help scrub this area, keep it clean. And even with removing all of that gingiva in between the teeth, I don't usually do restorative checks on my patients for how long it heals, but I have seen them back in a week or so, and you will be surprised by how quickly this heals and by how healthy it is here too. So I'm going to go back in here, smooth off the rest of this. As you can see, I like to do one area at a time. So started with the distal here, moving on to the buccal, just gently moving pretty much remove the composite until you start to see tooth structure, and then stop and make sure everything's smooth. So I'm running out of things to say. You're understanding why I don't do crowns and why I'm not a restorative dentist, because it would be 2-hour crown appointments minimum just to have me prep everything. When I first started, I did a filling on my longtime assistant, now office manager, and it was a really simple DO on number 4, and it took like an hour and a half. And so she knows that when I'm coming in, it's going to be, if I'm doing anything restorative wise, it's going to take a while. So don't worry about the bleeding gums there. That will all heal up nicely. So coming back around those line angles, just getting those polished up and making sure everything looks good there. There was a little gap in the composite initially. I just cut that out. You guys don't need to see me. It's the same exact process again. Etch, prime, bond, fill that in. But there was a small gap on the palatal, so I did seal that in, but this video is getting long enough already, so you don't need to see that. Polish that up, as you can see. Once again, just kind of creating nice, smooth surfaces. And if you're a general dentist watching this, shout out in the comments. Would you prefer it to be smooth like this, or do you want to have the margins actually prepped? Like I said, I found unless they're going over for the crown immediately, it's better to leave things flush like this, and the gums heal up a lot nicer. Don't worry about those bleeding gums. You'd be surprised. The mouth heals up so quickly, especially because you're leaving the gap between the teeth. That means they're not going to get food caught in there. Really easy to just rinse that out with water. So finally, we're going through here with one of my very favorite burrs. This is a barrel burr. Shout out to Sacramento Valley Dental Specialist. That's where I first learned to use this thing. I couldn't fit it with the Glickman clamp in there, so pulled that out, and we're going to come in here. This is a fantastic burr for doing your occlusal shaping, for smoothing off sharp edges. Absolutely love this thing, and once again, it lasts forever. So really great burr. Highly, highly recommend it. I'll drop a link to that one as well. And as you can see, we're just getting that central groove. This tooth was slightly off in the arch, and so I'm gonna reshape it so that the central groove is in line, because I'm pretty sure the dentist is going to keep it in that occlusion. But as you can see, it does a great job just smoothing off those sharp angles that wheel burr created. You don't want to leave any 90-degree angles because it's really rough on the tongue. That's actually how I started to discover this, as I would take the tooth, a lot of carious teeth out of the bite, using that wheel burr, and patients would complain that there's a sharp edge inside the mouth. And so you'd have to go back in and smooth it off. And you can use a straight diamond. You can use that 818, but I really like using this barrel burr. It does a really nice job. So we're going to go through. You'll see the final picture here in just a second. Once again, not worried about that gum tissue at all. You can see we did a great job building that tooth up, creating those really smooth margins. So it's going to be great for the doc. Just want to do a quick check, make sure we are out of the bite. I'm not worried about restorative space. The doc can decide how much or how little space she wants, but making sure everything looks good there. No interferences, any issues back there. Her lips were a little tough in this case, so I had to create some space there. But very happy with it. Looks good opposing, and we are all done as far as that case. So we'll look at that final x-ray here, and as you'll see, really smooth margins. Thanks for hanging out with me today. If you have any questions about the materials used, please drop a link or a question below, and I will keep posting these. So let me know what you guys think of this format. Thank you so much, and I will see you next time.